Morning light slid across the small dining table as Lisa set down 2 plates, the toast cut diagonally the way Perry liked, egg steaming, tea waiting. "You're early," she said gently, smoothing a faded tablecloth that had survived years of careful washing. Perry checked his watch, thumbs already active on his phone. "Quarterly review," he muttered, not looking up. Their home breathed modest pride. A framed photo from their first apartment, a clay flower pot she once rescued, lists for groceries pinned by a magnet. Lisa's routine was a quiet choreography, meal, brief prayer, a smile. "Eat before it gets cold," she urged. He finally looked at her, softening an inch. "You always fuss." She laughed, a bright note in a room growing increasingly spare. "I fuss because I care." He took a bite, stared past her at nothing, mind already pacing through numbers, meetings, faces. She noticed the distance like a cool draft under a closed door, yet tucked the feeling away. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Thanks," he answered, the word landing short. Lisa cleared crumbs with gentle strokes, steady, practiced, believing love was mostly small faithfulness repeated without applause. Outside, morning traffic hummed patiently. In the evenings, Lisa ironed Perry's shirts beside the window, the hiss of steam punctuating neighborhood sounds, vendors calling, bicycles rattling, children racing home. Sometimes Perry joined her there, retelling stories of lean years when they shared instant noodles and split bus fare. "Remember the rain that flooded our mattress?" she would ask, smiling at the ridiculous memory. "I remember," he'd grin, eyes lighting before his phone chimed and carried him somewhere else. She threaded needles, patched a sleeve, folded laundry like prayer. At night they would lie side by side, her fingertips tracing circles on his wrist while he scrolled articles about expansion, mergers, better clients. "We're okay, right?" she whispered once. "Of course," he said, turning away to set his alarm. Lisa looked at the ceiling, counting tiny hairline cracks, telling them secrets the room kept. She believed marriages thickened like stew simmering slowly. She believed patience could teach a heart to listen. And though a small ache pressed under her ribs, she decided to keep loving loudly through quiet acts, warm meals, ironed collars, a door that always opened with her name on it. She exhaled, slow and steady, choosing hope over fear tonight. Perry's calendar filled with lunches where glasses clinked and laughter rose like steam, the air perfumed with ambition. At a rooftop bar, Nicholas slapped his shoulder. "You've arrived, my friend. Clients love confidence and color." Perry followed Nicholas's gaze toward a table of sleek dresses and lipstick. "You need a partner who looks like the life you're building," Nicholas said, half joking, half serious. Perry smiled, filing the idea. He had once adored Lisa's plain dresses and steady shoes because they matched their struggle, but success loosened old loyalties. On his way home, he imagined different curtains, a louder laugh beside him, a partner who dazzled rooms before he even spoke. The images excited him and embarrassed him in equal measure. "Ridiculous," he told the windshield, yet the thought glowed stubbornly. That night, when Lisa asked about his day, he offered headlines only. "Good. Productive. Nicholas wants us at a networking dinner." "Us?" she asked hopefully. "Work crowd," he replied, already moving past her. She nodded, folding the hope like a napkin. He dressed better, practiced charm, and began to measure value in applause, the quiet woman at home fading from his line of sight to him. The house no longer sounded like refuge to him. It sounded like waiting. The kettle whistled. Rain tapped softly on the awning. Lisa said grace before dinner, familiar, predictable. Perry told himself routine was the enemy and novelty the answer. "We should travel," he said suddenly. Lisa's face brightened. "Where?" "I'll plan it," he promised, already thinking of trips he would take without her. His phone vibrated, Nicholas again, reminding him about the dinner. Perry glanced at Lisa's cardigan, her unpainted lips, and felt a sting of shame for the thought that followed. She reached for his hand across the table. "Whatever happens at work, you're not alone." He withdrew gently. "I know." After dishes, Lisa hummed while wiping counters, and Perry stood in the doorway studying her, searching for the excitement he craved, but seeing only the comfort he had begun to despise. "Maybe I've outgrown this," he whispered to the hallway. The hallway gave no answer, only the stubborn scent of lemon soap and the echo of vows that had once meant everything and now felt like clothes 2 sizes too small. He stood there longer than usual, uncertain, hungry, restless, and afraid. The networking dinner sparkled with city lights and practiced laughter. Nicholas waved Perry over, grinning. Meet Janet, creative strategist, miracle worker for board brands. Janet turned, her smile precise, her handshake warm enough to suggest interest without commitment. I've heard your firm is expanding, she said. Trying, Perry replied, surprised at his own eagerness. Janet's questions cut neatly, market share, positioning, narrative. She listened like a negotiator and laughed like a friend. You should tell bigger stories, she said, eyes catching the skyline. Maybe I need the right storyteller, he answered, startling himself. When he finally stepped outside for air, she joined him on the balcony. You work too hard, she teased. Ambition doesn't sleep. Neither do I, she smiled, leaving the sentence open like an invitation. She wore a midnight dress that moved like water, but it was her composure that captured him, the calm of someone who never begged rooms to notice. Janet slid a minimalist card into his palm. Call if you want momentum, she said. The word vibrated in him longer than the music. When Nicholas drifted away, she remained, anchoring their small island of conversation with startling ease. The city breathing below. Back home, Lisa waited up with ginger tea, a habit that had soothed many long nights. How was it? She asked, handing him the mug. Fine, productive. Met a strategist Nicholas recommended, he said. Janet, he added casually, as if saying a weather report. Lisa nodded, filing the name without comment. She thinks we should tell bigger stories, he continued. What story do you want told? Lisa asked softly. Perry shrugged. One where everything shines. She rested a hand on his shoulder. He showered, lay beside her, and pretended sleep, while memory replayed Janet's laugh, the skyline in her eyes, and the feeling of stepping towards something he could not name without betraying everything he already had. Ambition can shine and still be honest, Lisa whispered to the dark. He hadn't slept. He stared into the ceiling's quiet and said nothing. The card waited inside his wallet tonight. Perry grew skilled at avoiding Lisa's gaze. He left earlier, returned later, perfected the art of a conversation that sounded like weather reports. At dinner, he scrolled, face lit blue. Can we eat without the phone? Lisa asked gently. It's work. So is love, she said, surprising herself. He blinked, then sighed. Please, not tonight. She swallowed the retort and passed the stew. Perry tasted salt and thought absurdly of champagne. His mind replayed Janet's smile, the word momentum, the promise of rooms where he would no longer be invisible beside a quiet woman. He told himself it wasn't betrayal if he only talked. Still, he erased chats, turned off message previews, learned new habits of secrecy with alarming speed. Later, when Lisa asked how the presentation went, he answered, fine, and added nothing. Her nod felt like a mirror showing him a man he didn't recognize yet refused to question. The call came through Janet. You free tomorrow? Yes, he heard himself say. Coffee then, she said. At home, Lisa set out bowls for dessert and told him the mangoes were finally sweet this season. He nodded, tasted sunshine, and hid the sorrow inside. Lisa began noticing tiny edits to their life, the cologne Perry never wore before, a shirt too flashy for his taste, the lingering taste of peppermint that wasn't hers. She arranged the bedroom twice without knowing why, as if a better layout could move the cold back out. You're quiet, Perry said one night, almost defensive. I'm listening, she replied. To what? To us, he laughed without humor. We're fine. Then hold my hand and say it, she whispered. He did, briefly, then let go when the phone pulsed again. She drafted a message to Teresa, then deleted it. She lit a candle and whispered, Teach me to be brave. Perry walked past doorway, not entering. Tonight, the evenings stretched like corridors. Lisa filled them with chores done slowly, not to finish but to feel time pass. She washed the pans till their metal shone like patience, folded napkins into triangles, watered the spider plant with a careful hand. When Perry returned late, she greeted him with a smile that trembled only after he looked away. Long day? Back to back. She warmed stew, waited near the microwave's soft hum, and tried to hold her questions in a gentler way. Anything you want to share? It's all spreadsheets, he said, kissing the air near her cheek. His cologne was new. In their bedroom, she kept his side of the closet tidy, willing tenderness to return through order. On her nightstand sat a notebook where she wrote small gratitude lists, breathing, work, sunlight on the curtains, because some days she struggled to remember what to hold. "God, keep my heart soft," she whispered. A message arrived on Perry's phone, bright against the dark. She turned away from the glow, closed her eyes, and waited for sleep that walked toward her like someone reconsidering whether to knock. She remembered vows spoken under cheap fairy lights once. On Saturday afternoon, Lisa baked banana bread, the scent turning rooms into memory. Perry tasted a slice while tying his shoes. "Still perfect," he said, sounding far away. "We could take a drive later," she offered. "Brain check, you say that a lot now." He paused, then pretended not to hear. Lisa carried a loaf to the neighbors, walked the long way back, letting sun make her worries lighter. At the market, she picked mangoes, picked them again, replaced them, finally choosing none, realizing she wanted something she couldn't buy, assurance, detention, a shared joke. Teresa texted a photo of a silly hat and wrote, "Smile?" Lisa sent a red heart and typed, deleted, retyped, then sent nothing else at all. When evening fell, she curled on the couch with Perry's jacket like a borrowed hug, whispering, "We were beautiful once." The whisper stayed. Morning it had slid to floor. Lisa smoothed it, tucked it into her Bible, and told herself that saving a marriage sometimes meant saving the softness that made one possible. Gently, Janet texted Perry at odd hours with messages that felt like dares. If ambition had a soundtrack, what song would it be? He grinned at his screen in meetings he used to take seriously. She suggested coffee, proposed a gallery opening where photographs of strangers' lives hung like permission slips. She stood close enough for his pulse to stutter and far enough to pretend it was accidental. "You work like a man trying to outrun something," she observed. "Maybe I'm running toward something," he said. "Toward whom?" "Toward better," he answered, forgetting that better once lived in his own kitchen. Janet never asked about Lisa, only about metrics and meaning, and whether he had ever wanted to live near the ocean. When he hesitated, she smiled. "You hesitated like a yes." By the third meeting, they had private jokes. By the fourth, she knew his coffee order. At the gallery, she tilted her head toward a portrait of a woman mid-laughter. "That's how winning should sound," she whispered, and he wanted to agree forever. One afternoon, she arrived at his office with a folder labeled Momentum, the word he had offered her like tribute. "Ideas," she said, placing it on his desk. Inside were notes about brand stories and prospective clients, but also a list titled Habits That Dull Vision. He read aloud, predictable routines. Conversations that repeat. Rooms that forget to applaud. She leaned on the doorframe. "You deserve rooms that see you." Perry swallowed the compliment like wine. "Come to the launch on Friday," she added, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Will there be cameras?" "There will be everything," she said, and laughed. After she left, he closed the blinds, sat in the half-dark, and admitted what he had been dodging. He liked how he felt near her, tall, necessary, noticed. He texted, "Friday, yes." She replied with a single spark emoji that somehow felt like a vow. He checked his reflection in the window, adjusting his tie for a braver man. Lisa's name lit his screen. He let it ring, typed, "In a meeting." Her reply, "Okay." He slipped the phone face down, chose the black blazer Janet suggested, and told himself success required strategic silences. Perry began carrying receipts like trophies, dinners that flashed on social timelines, boutique gifts wrapped in ribbon, car services called for distances he could have walked. "You're different these days," Nicholas observed over espresso. "Focused," Perry said. "Or distracted," Nicholas countered, but he smiled because the distraction looked expensive and therefore persuasive. Janet's messages braided praise and challenge so skillfully that he mistook them for love. Lisa, by contrast, asked about rest and vegetables and whether he had slept. He started calling that care nagging in his head. "I want you to be proud," Lisa told him one morning, straightening his collar. "Then stop worrying," he replied, stepping away from her hands. He ordered shoes he didn't need, presented Janet with noise-canceling headphones, sent flowers to an office that already knew his name. He told himself generosity proved commitment, and commitment justified desire. When a server delivered champagne unrequested, Janet clinked his glass and said, "See, the world knows who you are." Perry laughed too loudly, a man rehearsing his new part while the old one watched from the wings and wondered when performance had replaced real joy. He felt taller beside her bright certainty tonight. At home, the differences multiplied. The refrigerator held sparkling water he never used to buy and a calendar crowded with events that wore him thin but validated the image he curated. Lisa kept tucking small comforts into the day, his favorite socks warming on the radiator, a note in his briefcase that read, "Breathe." He missed them on purpose. "You seem far," she ventured. "I'm busy," he said. "Busy isn't the same as gone," she murmured. He walked to the doorway, then back again, as if unsure which world to occupy. An invoice for a necklace arrived by email. He deleted the notification before Lisa could glance over his shoulder. That night, in bed, she reached for him. "Not tonight," he whispered. "Perry," she said, everything else tucked behind his name. His guilt was a brief wave hitting stone there and immediately gone. He turned to the wall, and in the quiet, comparison finished its work, converting gratitude into scorn, one small, unguarded thought at a time. In the hallway, a family photo tilted. He did not straighten it. Lisa did, pressing frame like a bandage. She whispered, "We're not broken," as distance rearranged furniture in her heart. Lisa began treating the bank app like a weather report, checking, refreshing, pretending she simply needed to know if it might rain. Withdrawals appeared without labels she recognized. The new charges bore boutiques she had never visited, restaurants that didn't match her cooking, rides at hours she spent alone. She opened Perry's drawer to replace socks and found a receipt folded into fourths, perfume rising from the paper like a confession. She closed the drawer, reopened it, closed it again. That evening she asked, "Do we need to talk about money?" Perry didn't look up. "Everything is under control." "Under whose control?" "Lisa, please." She nodded, filed the answer under hurt, and washed dishes that didn't need washing. Later, when he slept, she stood at the window and watched their reflection hovering like ghosts, the shape of a couple almost touching and somehow far. She pressed her fingertips to the glass and prayed, not for proof, but for courage to face it if proof arrived anyway. She checked salary deposit, steady, yet spending sprinted like it had somewhere to be. She traced dates on a calendar and saw patterns, meetings, later returns, withdrawals that matched rainstorms. Teresa visited with oranges and a stubborn cheer that made Lisa both grateful and shy. They peeled fruit at the table, threads of pith gathering like snow. "You're thinner," Teresa said. "Cooking less for two," Lisa joked, then winced at her own words. Teresa waited. "Things feel loud inside," Lisa admitted. "Talk to him," Teresa urged. "Talking is different from being heard." Teresa squeezed her hand. "Then choose yourself enough to be clear." Lisa practiced lines out loud. "I feel ignored. I'm worried about money." "Where do you go?" Her voice shook, but the words stood. That night, when Perry returned, shoes loud on hallway tile, Lisa met him at the door and said, "I need us to speak plainly." "Plainly about what?" he asked, keys in his hand. "About us, about money, about your late nights." He exhaled. "Work demands sacrifices." "So does marriage," she answered. He placed keys and said, "Not tonight." She stepped, stunned by how heavy words could feel. Janet disliked limbo. At the launch party, she steered Perry toward a corner where the music softened. "You're brilliant," she murmured, "but brilliance needs boundaries. People treat men differently when they know a woman has chosen them." "You've chosen me," he said, half asking. "Temporarily," she replied with a teasing smile that landed like a warning. "Temporary doesn't suit me." "Then change it." She outlined what security meant, her name protected, her future guaranteed, not whispers but paperwork. "I'm not a secret," she said. "I'm an investment." Perry nodded, thirsting for the certainty her gaze promised. "What does that look like?" "A written agreement," Janet answered. "Not a ring." "Rings play well in pictures, papers hold in court." She spoke about reputation, how women get punished for proximity unless proximity is defined. "I won't be punished," she said. "I won't be replaced." In that moment, paperwork felt proof that promises could be rendered as signatures, something lasting because ink demanded it. Surprises belonged to young men. He would be strategic. Over dinner the next night, she set conditions in a voice silked with affection. I don't want chaos, Janet said. I want stability, clarity, and my dignity intact. You'll have it, Perry promised, the words jumping out before Prudence arrived. Then let your lawyer draft a deal, she said, tracing the rim of her glass. He hesitated, images of Lisa pressing a sticky note to the fridge flickered, then pushed them aside. I'll handle it, he said. No, I will, Janet smiled. My legal team is faster. But I need to know you're serious, she whispered, leaning in so close he forgot every objection he meant to raise. By dessert, she had the language settled. Protection clauses, discretionary accounts, access in emergencies, signatures soon. Perry lifted his glass like a pledge. On the ride home, he rehearsed explanations, drafted and deleted messages to Nicholas and to Lisa, and finally texted Janet, agreed. Her reply, then let's not delay, arrived with a link. The document glowed official and vague, a promise dressed in legal clothes. He told himself it protected everyone. His pen waited in the desk drawer like a decision already made. For tomorrow night would end the awkward double life. That structure could sanctify desire. In his office, he spread papers across the desk and tried to translate feeling into clauses. I will be fair, he said aloud, as if words could absolve motives. Janet texted refinements that sounded professional and tasted like power, access to certain accounts, clarity around assets, expectations about time. No surprises, she wrote. He stared at those two words and felt strangely relieved. Surprises belonged to young men with little to lose. He would be strategic. He sent her a draft title, Mutual Commitment and Support Agreement. She replied with a heart, then added, Please add residency and emergency authorizations. He typed them, fingers moving faster than thought, convinced that love needed proof and proof needed signatures. He pictured a launch in a city, Janet on his arm, investors admiring efficiency. He imagined waking without ache of secrecy. If anyone questioned him, he would say, We put everything in writing, and that would end it. He believed documents could quiet hearts. That evening, Lisa set candles on the table and served a simple stew, the kind Perry used to praise with both hands reaching for seconds. You're quiet, she said. Work, he answered, pulling his chair closer without really sitting with her. I miss us, Lisa said. He swallowed. I'm trying to build something bigger. Bigger than us. He didn't answer. The candles fluttered, casting shadows of two heads that didn't quite touch. After dishes, he returned to study. Lisa brought tea and asked, Anything I can help with? It's technical, he said. I'm good with difficult. He almost called her back, then didn't. He opened an email to Nicholas, subject, Agreement review, then closed it. Janet texted, sent. He typed almost and practiced his signature on a sticky note, stunned by how decisive it looked. The house hummed without her voice. He remembered their first apartment, thin walls and thicker dreams, and nights she ironed his only shirt before an interview while whispering, You've got this. We could, he thought, then pushed the thought aside. Documents will protect everyone, he murmured, as if contracts could cradle kindness. Perry sat in the sleek office of a notary, pen poised above the thick document that Janet's lawyers had prepared. The language was dense, technical, lined with terms he barely skimmed, but the sight of Janet across from him, smiling with quiet satisfaction, pushed away his doubts. Just sign, Perry, she said smoothly, her manicured hand resting lightly on the folder. This is what commitment looks like. He hesitated only for a breath before pressing his name down, stroke after stroke, until the page claimed him. There, he muttered, exhaling as though he had crossed a finish line. Janet leaned over, kissed his cheek, and whispered, Now you've chosen us. He flushed with pride, convinced he had solidified a future where she was the jewel at his side. The notary stamped the papers, the sound sharp in the quiet room, a finality Perry welcomed without question. To him, it was a declaration of power, a man who had not only built success but also mastered his personal life with a boldness few dared. Walking out, Janet slipped her arm through his. Do you feel lighter? She asked, her voice laced with triumph. Perry nodded, grinning as though he had conquered something noble. This settles everything, he said. She looked at him and smiled with a flicker of victory in her eyes. Yes, she replied, it settles everything. Back home, Lisa laid out dinner in silence, unaware of the ink that had redrawn her marriage. Perry ate with a strange brightness in his eyes, glancing at his phone more than at her face. "You seem different," Lisa observed gently. "I'm just focused," he answered. When she pressed no further, the silence between them grew like a canyon. Upstairs, he placed the signed copy into his drawer with an almost ceremonial care, believing he had secured his future. He did not notice how the house itself seemed colder, as though the walls understood what he had just done, even if Lisa never spoke of it. That evening, Perry returned from work with a strange rigidity in his step. Lisa met him at the door, hopeful for conversation, but he cut her off before she could ask about his day. "Lisa," he began, voice clipped, "you don't have to wait around anymore." She froze, dish towel in hand. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. He looked straight at her, unflinching. "I've moved on. Janet is my future. You're free to go." The words struck like stones, each syllable hammering at the vows they once made. Lisa swallowed, gripping the towel until her knuckles whitened. "After everything?" she whispered, her voice breaking under the weight of disbelief. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he said coldly, turning away as if she were an inconvenience. Lisa blinked back tears, but remained composed. She set the towel aside and nodded, the silence between them screaming louder than her heart. Perry poured himself a drink, his back turned, refusing to see the devastation he had caused. In the kitchen light, Lisa steadied herself, pressing her palms against the counter until her breathing calmed. "So this is it?" she asked, her tone no longer trembling but eerily calm. "This is it," Perry confirmed, sipping the drink as if pronouncing a verdict. Lisa studied him for a long moment, searching for the man who once whispered promises beneath fairy lights, but finding only arrogance and distance. "Then you've chosen your path," she said quietly. Without another word, she walked upstairs, her steps measured, her dignity intact, even as her heart shattered. Perry stayed in the living room, convincing himself he had done what powerful men must, cut ties cleanly. Upstairs, Lisa began folding clothes into a small bag, her movements deliberate, her silence heavier than any accusation. She did not cry. She only paused once, touching her wedding band, before slipping it off and placing it gently on the dresser. Lisa descended the stairs the next morning with a small bag in hand. Perry barely glanced up from his coffee, hiding behind the newspaper as though her presence no longer mattered. She stopped at the door, turned briefly, and said in a low voice, "I hope you find what you're looking for, Perry." He shifted uncomfortably, but did not answer. The house held its breath as Lisa walked out, the door clicking shut behind her like the final punctuation of a story she had carried for years. Outside, the morning air was cool, almost cleansing. She inhaled deeply, feeling both the sting of betrayal and the strange relief of release. Her footsteps echoed down the quiet street, each one pulling her farther from the life she had given everything to. She carried only a bag, but inside her heart weighed 1,000 memories of love, sacrifice, and prayers left unanswered. At her parents' house, Teresa opened the door and gasped at the sight of Lisa's weary face. "Lisa, what happened?" she asked, embracing her sister tightly. "It's over," Lisa replied softly, holding back tears. He made his choice. Teresa led her inside, offering comfort with silence and warm tea. Lisa sat on the edge of the bed in her old room, the familiar walls now a refuge. She whispered to herself, "I will not break. I cannot break." Across town, Perry settled into his leather chair, already drafting texts to Janet. He ignored the lingering emptiness in the house, convincing himself he was finally free. But the absence of Lisa's quiet movements, her prayers, and her presence left a hollowness no luxury could fill. He refused to acknowledge it, yet the silence wrapped itself around him like a warning. Janet wasted no time stepping into Perry's world as though she had always belonged. She strutted beside him at upscale restaurants, her laughter sharp and confident, drawing eyes wherever they went. "You see?" Perry whispered one evening, proud as the maître ushered them to a prime table. "With you, the world respects me differently." Janet smiled slyly, sipping her wine. "That's because you finally chose the right partner." She leaned closer, her perfume intoxicating, her words carefully crafted to stroke his ego. Perry basked in the glow, imagining himself elevated, admired, envied. He believed he had traded up, replacing quiet faithfulness with dazzling brilliance. "I want everyone to know us," Janet declared, and he agreed eagerly, blinded by the illusion of her affection. They appeared at functions as a striking pair, Perry's colleagues whispering about how quickly his life had changed. Some raised eyebrows, others congratulated him, and Perry soaked in the attention like rain on dry soil. Back at his office, Janet perched on his desk, flipping through files with casual authority. "We need to think bigger," she said, scribbling notes. "Partnerships, events, expansions. I'll guide you." He admired her ambition, mistaking manipulation for inspiration. Lisa's steady presence had been replaced by Janet's whirlwind energy, and Perry convinced himself it was progress. At night, he lay beside Janet, intoxicated by her perfume and promises, never suspecting her smile carried secrets. One evening, Perry returned home alone, Janet still out at a social event. He opened the door to silence, the absence of Lisa's quiet routines pressing against him like a cold draft. The house, once alive with her humming and small acts of care, now felt hollow. He wandered into the kitchen, where the cupboards were half empty, no warm meal waiting. For the first time, the success he flaunted outside did not comfort him inside. He poured himself a drink, staring at the untouched wedding band Lisa had left behind on the dresser. He picked it up, turned it in his fingers, then set it down quickly, as if it burned him. "I'm fine," he muttered to the empty walls. "I'm better now." Yet the silence echoed, refusing to agree. Perry sat in the living room, staring at the clock ticking too loudly. He remembered how Lisa used to ask about his day, how she always listened without judgment. The memory unsettled him. She was too quiet, he reminded himself. Janet is exciting. But as the hours passed, the excitement dulled, leaving only the ticking clock and his own restless thoughts. When Janet finally walked in, smelling of wine and perfume, she kissed him quickly and went straight to the bedroom. Perry followed, but the hollowness clung to him. That night he lay awake, the house still too quiet despite her presence. He realized that Lisa's silence had been different, soft, warm, filled with love. This silence was empty, heavy, unkind. The next days unfolded like a carnival for Perry. He took Janet shopping, swiping his card without hesitation as she tried on dresses that glittered under store lights. "You deserve the best," he told her, watching her twirl before the mirror. She grinned, kissing him lightly. "And you deserve me looking my best." They dined at expensive restaurants, Perry relishing the envy in other men's eyes when Janet clung to his arm. "We're unstoppable," he boasted, raising his glass. Janet laughed, her eyes glinting. "Then let's live like it." Perry felt intoxicated by this new rhythm, money flowing freely, applause following him everywhere, Janet's charm pulling him deeper into her world. He told himself this was freedom, that he had finally escaped the shackles of Lisa's quiet routines. At a high-profile event, Perry introduced Janet to business associates as his partner, a word that tasted powerful on his tongue. She charmed them effortlessly, slipping compliments and clever remarks that left everyone impressed. On the drive home, Perry said, "You make me look like a king." Janet squeezed his hand, whispering, "You always were." He beamed, drunk on her validation. But beneath the glamour, there were small cracks. Janet's phone buzzing at odd times, her attention drifting mid-conversation, her smile sometimes too practiced. Perry ignored it all, convincing himself that every king must overlook small shadows in the name of glory. For now, he was basking in the sun, blind to the storm forming just beyond the horizon. Behind Perry's back, Janet's life was a quiet web of hidden connections. Late at night, when he fell asleep beside her, she slipped into the bathroom to text Morris. "It's almost done," she typed, smirking at her reflection. Morris replied, "Good. Just keep him signing." Janet returned to bed, curling beside Perry as though nothing had happened. The next day, she slipped business documents into her bag while Perry spoke on the phone. "What are you doing with those?" he asked absent-mindedly. "Just reviewing," she replied, flashing a disarming smile. He believed her without question. Janet kissed him lightly and whispered, "I just want to help." Perry felt grateful, mistaking her ambition for loyalty. At lunch with Morris, Janet's demeanor shifted. "He doesn't even read the fine print," she said, sliding papers across the table. Morris chuckled, sipping his drink. Pride blinds men faster than anything. Janet leaned in, her smile sharp. In a few days, everything will be ours. She returned to Perry that evening, slipping seamlessly back into her role as the affectionate partner. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. Perry kissed her forehead, unaware of the trap tightening around him. Janet's smile lingered long after he closed his eyes, a smile that hid more than it revealed. On the third night, Perry woke to silence. He reached for Janet, but the bed was empty. Frowning, he called out, "Janet?" No answer. He checked the closet. Her clothes were gone. Heart racing, he grabbed his phone and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "Janet, call me back," he said, trying to steady his voice. Hours passed with no response. Panic crept in. He drove to her apartment, but it was stripped bare, as though she had never lived there. Desperation grew with each unanswered call, each empty room. Perry's hands shook as he gripped the steering wheel, the certainty he once carried unraveling with frightening speed. Back home, he paced the living room, staring at his phone, waiting for it to light up. He opened drawers, checked bags, looked for any sign she might return. There was nothing. The house echoed with silence, mocking him. He poured a drink, but it did nothing to calm his nerves. "She'll come back," he muttered, trying to convince himself. But as dawn broke, the truth began to gnaw at him. Janet hadn't just left, she had disappeared. The realization chilled him to his core. For the first time, Perry felt the weight of fear pressing down, a fear he could not shake. By morning, Perry was a man unraveling. He drove to every restaurant Janet liked, stopping staff to ask if they had seen her. "Sorry, sir, not recently," they answered politely. He scoured shopping malls, peered into cafes, even visited the hotel where they once spent afternoons together. Nothing. At one point, he parked in a lot, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. "Where are you?" he whispered, the silence inside the car suffocating. His phone remained stubbornly quiet, mocking his desperation. He called Nicholas, his voice shaking. "Have you seen Janet?" Nicholas paused, then said carefully, "Perry, maybe she needs space." Perry snapped, "No, she wouldn't just vanish." Nicholas sighed, "You're not making sense. Calm down." Later that night, Perry stormed into Janet's old office, demanding answers. "She resigned last week," the receptionist said. "Didn't she tell you?" Perry staggered back, stunned. He sat in his car, gripping his head, trying to piece together what had happened. Every place he checked turned up empty. He drove back home, the house colder than ever. Sitting in the dark, he muttered, "She'll call. She has to." But deep down, dread clawed at his chest. He had built his life around Janet, and now that she was gone, he realized how fragile it all was. He sat in silence, unable to admit the truth forming in his mind. She had planned this all along. Perry's phone buzzed in the middle of the night. Relief surged. He thought it was Janet. But instead, it was a notification from the bank. Withdrawal alert. He blinked, confused. Another buzz, another withdrawal. His heart pounded as he opened the app. His accounts had been drained, balances slashed to near zero. He scrolled frantically, seeing transfer after transfer, all authorized with his signature. "What?" he whispered, panic rising. He rushed to his office, yanking open drawers. The documents he had signed with Janet glared back at him. He read the fine print at last, his stomach dropping as he realized what he had given away. Properties, assets, shares, all shifted quietly into her name. He collapsed into the chair, trembling. No, this can't be real, but it was. His empire had been gutted with his own consent. His phone buzzed again, creditors demanding payments. He threw it across the room, clutching his head. "She used me," he whispered, the words tasting like poison. For the first time, arrogance gave way to fear, pride to shame. He stared at the wedding band Lisa had left behind, suddenly understanding the depth of what he had lost. Janet hadn't just left him. She had destroyed him. The silence of the house pressed in, suffocating, as Perry realized he had traded love for illusion and ended up with nothing. Rumors began to swirl in whispers Perry could not ignore. At a downtown cafe, he overheard two businessmen speaking in hushed tones about Janet's real lover, Morris, a name that struck him like lightning. "They say he's been around for months, studying Perry's moves like a chess game," one man said. "She was never his, She was Morris's from the start. Perry's stomach churned, rage and humiliation fighting for dominance. He slammed his coffee cup down and demanded, "What do you know about Morris?" The startled men shook their heads, mumbling excuses as they left, but their words echoed in Perry's ears long after. That night, alone in his study, Perry dug through old text logs, credit card bills, and travel receipts, realizing too late that the signs were all there. Dinners booked for two when he was out of town, charges for flights he never took, gifts purchased under his name but never received by him. His hands shook as he whispered, "She wasn't even mine, not for a single day." He pictured Janet in Morris's arms, laughing at how easy Perry had been to manipulate, and the thought shattered him more than the empty bank accounts ever could. The following morning, Perry confronted Nicholas with desperation. "Tell me the truth. Did you know about Morris?" Nicholas sighed, pity shadowing his eyes. "Everyone knew, Perry. Everyone but you. Pride made you blind." Perry staggered back, choking on the betrayal that had consumed his life. "I gave her everything," he muttered. Nicholas placed a hand on his shoulder. "No, you gave her access. She never wanted you, only what you could give." The words cut deeper than a knife. Perry stumbled into the street, the world around him spinning, every honk and footstep a reminder of his downfall. He returned home, collapsed on the couch, and buried his face in his hands. The name Morris now haunted him as much as Janet's betrayal, an invisible figure who had orchestrated his ruin. The empire he built was crumbling, and the realization that he had been only a pawn left him hollow. In the weeks that followed, Perry's business collapsed with frightening speed. Clients who once praised him began pulling contracts, citing instability and whispers of scandal. At a tense board meeting, one partner stood up and said bluntly, "Your name is no longer an asset, Perry. It's a liability." The words sent murmurs across the room, but no one defended him. Perry leaned forward, voice hoarse. "I built this from nothing. You can't just discard me." Another partner replied coldly, "You signed it all away. Janet and her people have what they need. You left us exposed." Perry slammed his fist on the table, but the sound only highlighted his desperation. Papers were shuffled, decisions made, and before the meeting ended, he had been stripped of authority. He walked out of the glass building that once carried his pride, now just another man defeated by his own recklessness. The street outside seemed louder, harsher, filled with stares that felt like judgment. He clutched his briefcase with trembling hands, knowing it carried nothing but useless documents. Back home, Perry sat in the darkened living room, staring at the fireplace that no longer burned. He replayed every choice he had made, every moment he chose Janet's validation over Lisa's quiet love. He remembered Lisa telling him once, "Not every deal is worth signing," words he had laughed off then, but now pierced through him like prophecy. His phone buzzed again, another canceled contract. He didn't answer. He simply let it fall to the floor, the vibration rattling against the wood like mockery. Perry whispered to himself, "This can't be the end," but deep down he knew it was. His empire wasn't collapsing because of bad business. It was collapsing because he had surrendered his foundation to someone who had never loved him. And now, the world was watching his downfall with satisfaction. The phone became Perry's enemy. Day after day, creditors called with demands that grew more aggressive. "Mr. Perry, your payment is overdue. We will be forced to take legal action," one stern voice warned. He tried stalling, making vague promises, but their patience had run out. Letters arrived, stamped in red, piling on the desk until they looked like wounds spreading across his life. Perry slammed his hands on the table, shouting at the empty house. "I said I'll pay!" But his voice only echoed back at him, hollow and powerless. He sold off what he could, cars, jewelry, even furniture, but it barely scratched the surface of the debts Janet had tied to his name. Every attempt at escape only dragged him deeper into humiliation. Once, his phone had been a symbol of success, buzzing with deals and congratulations. Now it rang with nothing but demands, his reputation reduced to whispers and pity. Late one night, a knock came at the door. Perry opened it to find two men in suits delivering official documents. "This is your final notice," one said flatly. Perry's hand shook as he signed for it, his pride shattering as he realized how far he had fallen. He closed the door and sank to the floor, papers clutched against his chest. "How did it come to this?" he whispered. He remembered Janet's voice in his ear, promising, "This is security." The irony twisted like a knife. Security had become chains, and freedom was a memory he couldn't reclaim. He buried his face in his hands, wishing for Lisa's quiet strength, the way she always knew how to calm storms. But she was gone, and all he had left was the suffocating weight of debts and the silence of a house that no longer held love. News of Perry's downfall spread quickly, traveling from boardrooms to street corners until it reached Lisa at her family's home. Sitting at the kitchen table, she overheard relatives whispering. "Did you hear? Perry's empire has collapsed. Janet drained everything." Lisa kept her eyes down, peeling an orange with steady fingers. Teresa, watching her, asked softly, "Does it hurt to hear it?" Lisa shook her head. "No, it hurts to remember how blind he was. But I won't go back." Her voice was firm, but inside, a wave of sorrow pressed against her chest. She thought of the years she had poured into him, the sacrifices, the prayers. Yet she did not allow herself to cry. Instead, she drew strength from silence, a silence that spoke louder than anger ever could. She carried herself with quiet dignity, refusing to let gossip drag her into bitterness. Meanwhile, Perry sat in his dim living room, staring at the wedding band Lisa had left behind. He picked it up, turning it over in his fingers, his chest aching with regret. He whispered into the emptiness, "Lisa, I'm sorry. I should have listened. I should have seen you." But there was no answer, only the heavy quiet of a home stripped of laughter. That silence pressed on him, suffocating, reminding him of what he had lost, not just wealth, but the woman who had loved him unconditionally. Across town, Lisa lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind replaying memories. She did not wish him harm, but neither did she wish to return. Her silence had become her shield, her dignity her greatest strength. And Perry, miles away, began to understand that her absence was the loudest judgment of all. Perry could no longer escape the weight of memory. One evening, as rain tapped against the window, he found himself staring at the empty chair across the dining table where Lisa once sat. He closed his eyes and remembered her laughter when he told stories of their early struggles. Her prayers whispered quietly over meals, her soft hand on his shoulder after long days. "Why did I trade that?" he muttered, his voice breaking. He slammed his fist on the table, but anger couldn't hide the truth. He had discarded loyalty for lust, and the price was everything. He walked through the house, touching objects she once held, a blanket she folded, a photo frame she dusted, a mug she favored. Each item became a wound, each memory a mirror showing him the man he had become. That night, he dreamed of her, standing in the kitchen, smiling softly as she poured him tea. In the dream, he reached for her hand, but she turned and walked away, her silence echoing louder than words. He woke with tears on his face, whispering, "Come back, Lisa, please." But the bed was empty, and so was his life. He realized too late that Lisa's quiet strength had been the foundation of his world, the anchor that kept him steady. Without her, he was adrift, drowning in regret. He pressed his hands to his face, knowing no amount of apologies could undo the damage. The love he once took for granted was gone forever, and the weight of that truth would haunt him for the rest of his days. Reports began trickling in. Janet had been spotted at an airport, traveling with a man who fit Morris's description. Soon after, whispers confirmed she had fled abroad, starting a new life with the fortune she stole. Perry sat in his office, reading the rumors, his hands trembling. "So it's true," he whispered. The image of her boarding a plane with Morris replayed in his mind, each thought cutting deeper than the last. He slammed the laptop shut, rage boiling inside him. "She took everything," he shouted, his voice echoing against empty walls. Yet beneath the anger lay humiliation, the unbearable truth that she had never truly been his. The world moved on without him, but Perry remained frozen, haunted by the vision of Janet's triumphant escape. In foreign cities, Janet lived lavishly, her laughter echoing in places Perry could never reach. But even as he imagined her happiness, Perry knew she was a shadow, a ghost who had stolen his future. He poured himself another drink, muttering, "She never loved me. She never even pretended." He realized then that he was not mourning Janet's absence, but his own blindness. She had been a mirage, and he had been a fool chasing it. The bitter truth pressed against his chest, heavier than debt, heavier than loss. Janet had left him with nothing but shame, and he had no one to blame but himself. While Perry drowned in regret, Lisa quietly began to rebuild her life. With the support of her family, she took on work that gave her independence and purpose. Her days were filled with new routines, helping her mother in the market, teaching children at the local school, rediscovering the strength she thought she had lost. "You're glowing," Teresa remarked one evening as they sat together, peeling vegetables. Lisa smiled faintly. "Pain can either break you or build you. I choose to be built." She no longer carried the heaviness of Perry's betrayal. Instead, she walked with quiet confidence, her dignity intact. The community noticed too. Neighbors who once pitied her now admired her, speaking of her as a woman of resilience. One afternoon, a friend from church approached her, saying, "Lisa, your strength has inspired many. You carry yourself like someone who's won, not lost." Lisa nodded, her eyes soft but determined. She had found peace in her silence, power in her composure. Though scars remained, she no longer lived in their shadow. Each day she proved to herself that love and betrayal did not define her worth. Her resilience did. She whispered to herself each night, "I survived." And in that survival, she found a new beginning. Perry's home became a prison of memories. Each room echoed with Lisa's absence and Janet's betrayal. He wandered the halls aimlessly, his footsteps heavy, his heart heavier still. He stared at the fireplace where Lisa once sat reading, at the kitchen where she once cooked, and felt the crushing emptiness consume him. He poured drink after drink, but nothing filled the void. Friends stopped calling. Colleagues avoided him, and the once proud man became a ghost in his own life. "I have nothing," he whispered to the silence. "Nothing." His eyes fell on the wedding band Lisa had left behind, gleaming on the dresser. He picked it up, clutching it to his chest, sobbing like a man finally broken. Nights were the worst. Alone in the dark, Perry replayed every mistake, every cruel word, every choice that had led him here. He longed for Lisa's laughter, for her quiet strength, for the love he had thrown away. But all he had were shadows and silence. The world outside moved on, but Perry remained frozen, trapped in the ruins of his pride. He whispered into the darkness, "Lisa, forgive me." But no answer came. Only the echo of his own voice, haunting him like a ghost that would never leave. Months later, fate brought them face to face. Perry spotted Lisa in town, her head held high, her smile serene. She looked radiant, her steps confident, her spirit unbroken. For a moment, he froze, unable to move, his chest tightening as if the world had stopped. "Lisa," he whispered, though she was too far to hear. He watched as she laughed with a friend, her joy genuine, her pain no longer visible. Desperation surged within him, and he stepped forward. "Lisa," he called. She turned, her eyes meeting his. For a brief moment, their history hung between them, the love, the betrayal, the silence. "Perry," she said calmly, her voice neither bitter nor soft, simply distant. He swallowed hard. "I was wrong. I lost everything. I lost you." Lisa studied him, her eyes steady, her composure unshaken. "You chose your path," she replied, her words gentle but firm. She turned away, continuing her walk, her dignity intact. Perry stood frozen, watching her fade into the crowd, his heart breaking anew. That indifference, that calm strength, wounded him more than Janet's betrayal ever had. For the first time, he realized Lisa had not just left him, she had outgrown him. Perry returned to his empty home, the echo of Lisa's calm words still ringing in his ears. He sank into the chair, covering his face with trembling hands. He had chased glamour and lost loyalty, traded gold for dust, love for illusion. Janet was gone, Morris had won, and Lisa had built a life without him. His empire, his pride, his illusions, all gone. What remained was silence, the kind that screamed truths he could no longer ignore. "I destroyed myself," he whispered, tears staining his cheeks. He stared at the wedding band one last time before placing it on the table, a symbol of everything he had lost. Across town, Lisa knelt in prayer, thanking God for strength, for dignity, for the courage to rise above pain. She had no interest in revenge, no desire to look back. Her silence had been her victory, her composure her weapon. Perry's downfall was not her triumph, it was his lesson. And as he sat alone in the house that had once been theirs, he realized the loudest judgment was not in her words, but in her absence. The man who had once believed he was untouchable was left with nothing but emptiness, while the woman he discarded walked forward with strength, never once looking back. Here's the Bible verse. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked, for whatever one sows, that will he also reap. Galatians 6 verse 7. This verse perfectly mirrors Perry's downfall. He sowed betrayal, pride, and greed, and in the end he reaped betrayal, humiliation, and loss. Lisa, on the other hand, sowed love, dignity, and silence, and in due season she reaped respect, peace, and strength. Moral of the story. The story teaches that betrayal and arrogance carry consequences that cannot be escaped. Perry believed trading loyalty for lust would bring him happiness, but instead it stripped him of everything he valued. Janet's deception showed that chasing illusions leads to destruction, while Lisa's quiet dignity proved that strength does not always roar, it often speaks loudest in silence. True wealth lies not in possessions or appearances, but in the love and loyalty of those who stand by us when no one else does. The moral is clear. Honor what is real before it is gone, for once trust is broken and love discarded, the emptiness left behind cannot be filled. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the lessons hidden within this story. Teach us to value love, loyalty, and integrity above fleeting pleasures and empty gains. Guard our hearts from pride and deception, and give us the wisdom to cherish those who stand faithfully by our side. Strengthen us to walk in dignity like Lisa, and remind us that silence and patience often speak louder than anger. May we always sow seeds of faithfulness and reap peace in our lives. In Jesus' name, amen. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Leave a like and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for watching.